Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members of the Security Council, thank you for the opportunity to brief the Council at a turning point for Iraq in its empowerment to handle its own affairs. Over the past few months, the eyes of the international community have been turned on a country totally engaged in pre-electoral activities, as Iraqis have prepared to cast their vote in the first governorate elections in 4 years. This undoubtedly has been the most significant political event of this reporting period. The end of 2008 has witnessed an acceleration of electoral activities, an increased preparedness by the Independent High Electoral Commission of Iraq, with all aspects of UNAMI work completely geared towards the electoral process for that period. 2 months into 2009, Iraq has emerged sovereign and rising to expectations. It successfully went through the first test by delivering the first fully Iraqi-led and owned elections. On 31st of January, as planned, provincial elections were conducted in 14 governorates with 42,000 polling stations in a striking lack of violence. This marks a remarkable event in a country that has suffered through so much conflict in recent years. It is a tribute to the growing effectiveness of the Iraqi security forces and attests to the increased stability in the country. With IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission, in the lead, Iraqis have demonstrated the capacity to run their own elections in what has been a daunting logistical and operational undertaking. Just look at the figures. 7.5 million Iraqis turned out to cast the ballots, 14,000 candidates, 400 political entities, all this for 440 seats. And I'm glad to say, among the 14,000 candidates, 3,900 women. These are the first polls which can have a direct impact on the day-to-day life of the Iraqis and could make, in fact, a major difference in the new local representatives because they are directly accountable to their own voters. It was an open list. They further look to rectify one problem we had in the past, the sectarian imbalance of local councils. This time, there was no boycott whatsoever by any significant component of the Iraqi population. IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission, should be commended for its highly professional efforts, both the effective preparations in the lead-up to the elections and their ultimate smooth conduct. Much should be attributed to a rigorous and professional field structure in place. Resisting political pressures, IEC remained vigilant in carrying through the procedures from polling day to the announcement of the final results 3 weeks later. With the intensive, constant assistance from UNAMI, the Iraqi Electoral Commission has overcome each hurdle every time, met operational deadlines, came out of a rather complicated and contentious parliamentary debate of the critical electoral legislation some time ago, regulated a complex formula for the seat allocations, minority and women representation, and concluded the adjudication of formal complaints, which we had up to 2,000, and they were all solved before this date. Following the release of provisional results on the 5th of February, final results were announced on the 19th of February, based on all valid ballots, plus the special needs voting, IDPs, and the adjustment for the complaints. We are now looking at a possible final certification of results after the short appeals period before the second week of March. That's when we will have this final certification, but we more or less know where we are. After that, the challenge will be the formation of councils and then the nomination of governors. While it remains to the Iraqis to interpret the result of these elections, it is heartening to see how all this moved smoothly, including the fact, again I must say, because it's something noteworthy, that among those who have been nominated about 110 women out of 440 new council members. These elections were recognized as credible and transparent, both by an impressive domestic observation, 490,000 local national observers, almost as much as the Iraqi army. And on the international side, we had 413 at the international monitor for 25 entities, coordinated by an EU-sponsored advisor. These elections should increase the confidence of Iraqis in their own local institutions. And I want to say, by looking at the Iraqi ambassador, Mabruk, as we said to the Prime Minister the other day, Mabruk wallahi, because it was something that in any country would have been a challenge to do. But much will now depend on the electoral and the elected leaders. They need to work within their own selected electoral system. They need to prove that they are capable to promote inclusive political dialogue, striking compromises and working in coalitions. In this regard, statements made by a number of political Iraqi leaders indicating their willingness to play a part in this process and allow others to do so are indeed very encouraging. Elections have undoubtedly been the flagship of our mandate during this period, dominating our efforts in the recent months. 2009 foresees continued electoral activities, with several possible other electoral rendezvous events in the coming months. This could include elections for the Kurdish National Assembly, where we have already been asked to be involved, set for this summer, possibly sub-district elections, culminating in the national parliamentary elections towards the end of this year. UNAMI will continue to provide significant degree of technical assistance to the IEC as mandated by you, the Council, and requested by the government of Iraq and the political parties. It will also, as requested, support the government's commitment to hold a census, which is long overdue. But UNAMI assistance, with your approval, will not stop there. It will adjust to what Iraq requires at this next step of transition. And one is obviously national reconciliation. Iraq needs now to embrace this opportunity and to raise above sectarian interest, be open to compromise and consensus. A country cannot truly attain its sovereignty or achieve lasting peace unless it instills confidence in its own institutions with respect to the rule of law and a unifying constitution, and it delivers basic needs. This implies a lot of effort, and it is in this next stage that UNAMI is committed to fully support the government of Iraq in this exercise of its own sovereignty and assumption of accountability. Of particular concern, and we all are constantly aware of it, remains the lingering potential tensions between the Arab and Kurdish sides in Iraq, which have had an impact almost in every aspect of the Iraq political scene. They have been the cause of non-real progress on the vital oil law, on the revenue sharing, on the constitutional review, and potential even tensions, for instance, recently in Kanakin between the armed forces of the central government and the Kurdish region. As we work as an honest broker, we try to promote a spirit of dialogue. UNAMI activities will see a particular shift after this period of the elections, an emphasis on our initiatives on the disputed internal boundaries and work on the Kirkuk, including through the Article 23 Committee. This committee is tasked by the Council of Representatives with finding a power-sharing formula for the provincial elections in Kirkuk, assessing property disputes and demographic issues. Work in these areas, rightly a priority, is viewed as a means to contribute to lowering this area of tensions in Kirkuk and elsewhere, and exploring new solutions for some of these most pressing issues. During my own recent visit to Kirkuk in December, to engage with the wider community on the ground, I frankly detected a momentum, a good momentum, for Kirkukis to explore locally generated options regarding the administrative future of Kirkuk. I really came out encouraged that the Kirkukis have a growing understanding that kifaya, as they say in Arabic, enough, that there is a need now to reach a compromise acceptable to all communities living there. Part of my trip was to discuss the work of Article 23 Committee, an important committee created in connection with the electoral law, and a very good container in order to introduce constructive proposals for finding a formula for the future of this area. The Article 23 Committee had been criticized to have been a little bit slow to start, so we conveyed to them the expectations and willingness by the local community to wake up and move on this, so the Article 23 would become more alive. We have since contributed to remove some of the obstacles to this work, and on the 2nd of February, my own political deputy has facilitated and accompanied the committee members' first visit to Kirkuk. They went finally to Kirkuk and started working, including by providing logistical, transport, security, and organizational support. We offered also our secretariat support, and in fact UNAMI has actively served de facto as a secretariat to the committee. And the committee has now started meeting both in Baghdad and Kirkuk. We have further offered UNAMI assistance in areas of technical expertise, with 2 consultants just now about to deploy, and mediation potential in case of disagreement will be available. UNAMI has been in parallel working on a comprehensive review of the so-called disputed areas in the governorates of Kirkuk, Salahdin, Diyala, and Nineveh, in line with the Security Council mandate and the consent given last year by Iraqi leadership. The first reports, came out, as you really recall, last year in June. We have delayed now the submission of the other reports, 11 of them, because we felt that we did not want to wish to take an initiative in the weeks leading to the elections, and that was in the consultation with the Prime Minister. We remain now in consultation with the Iraqi government and all concerned parties to carefully determine the appropriate timing and process for the finalization of the whole package of analytical reports of these the internally disputed areas. We hope and believe that the package of these reports may constitute probably the most in-depth and comprehensive analysis so far presented on these areas. And they shall examine different factors specific to the areas, including socioeconomic indices, the results of the electoral results of 2005 and 2009, the socioeconomic indicators, the injustices of the past regimes, administrative history, and what has happened just after 2003 on the ground, demographics and security conditions. All this is a series of indicators that will be taken into consideration in those analyses and studies. But the ultimate responsibility making any type of decisions will continue to lie first and foremost with the government of Iraq and the parties representing the areas concerned and the Kurdish regional leadership. At the same time, the Iraqi leadership should be encouraged to advance on other fundamental issues that we know they are interested in following up, which is the core of the tensions among different communities, i.e. the federalism, revenue sharing, sharing of Iraq's considerable resources, all this within the framework of the constitutional review. And UNAMI is available and ready to assist the government in following up on this. UNAMI also will remain committed in supporting the establishment of independent bodies, the most significant development being the legislation which has been passed providing the creation of a Human Rights Commission in Iraq. International partnership. The UN will continue to assist the country in its standing in the international community through the International Compact for Iraq, Security Council mandates, and relations with its own neighbors. On the regional front, recent months have seen opening of embassies of Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Arab Emirates, Jordan, Arab League, Syria, all these very hopeful signs of strengthening engagement within the region and with the region. UNAMI shall continue its involvement in this area according to its mandate, including through confidence-building bilateral initiatives and technical assistance to a so-called support mechanism for regional cooperation based inside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iraq. We remain in frequent contact with regional players and committed to assist Iraq's efforts to improve relations with its own immediate neighbors. As an example, one of the important aspects has been the important relation with Kuwait. We are hoping to be more and more involved in helping on a number of tracks, to include, for instance, the border maintenance, the question of missing the archives and missing the Kuwaitis, and the compensations. We have most recently pushed for a training project to build up the capacity in the Ministry of Human Rights in Iraq on the issue of exhumations in order to accelerate an issue which has been pending, and facilitating the transfer of a certain number of identified tapes which are available in Iraq to Kuwait to be witnessed by my friend and very active colleague Ambassador Tarasov in the next coming days. As regards to Iran, for instance, we welcome the announced setup of a joint committee between Iraq and Iran and the UN to work with the UN on demining and drug traffic control along the Iranian border. This is a concrete result on how we could facilitate concrete cooperation on borders. And we hope that this will become soon operational and eventually even link up with the Abadan Committee. We are welcoming and witnessing very constructive progress in the relation with Turkey, Jordan, and recently with Syria. Iraq continues to make progress towards economic and social recovery. It needs to be congratulated, again Mabruk, on reforms which led to the recent cancellation of the Paris Club debt. This proves that achievements of the compact benchmarks can yield concrete and immediate positive results. It is now critical to translate these gains into concrete improvements in the lives of everyone in Iraq. As Iraq assumes the full responsibility of a sovereign state, its citizens will look to their leaders, like anywhere else in the world, to provide better schools, jobs, electricity, supplies, health services. Elections have proven that this is the platform they were overwhelmingly elected on. The Iraqi people will increasingly consider this as the chief indicators of recovery and of trust. Social services and a market economy must recover from a quarter of a century of hardships and conflict. As an example, nearly almost 1/3 of Iraqi young people are still unemployed. Many Iraqi children still work in schools which are substandard classrooms. And safe water only reaches 40% of Iraqi homes. There is a challenge. We know the Iraqi government is determined to face this challenge, and we should help them. Low oil prices will also make it even more important to make proper priorities and proper prioritization of strategies for development. Iraq's 2009 expenditure budget is now with the Council of Representatives, and it is 21% lower than originally planned, and the capital investment part of it is being cut by 38%. So that is a challenge which is obviously going all over the world, but in a very delicate transitional period for Iraq. This means a need for investments to be directed where they are most needed and can make the greatest impact on recovery and on the life of everyone in Iraq. These challenges can be met through a more efficient and transparent public sector and a stronger private sector. The UN will work with the government to improve performance in these areas as required. Regarding humanitarian assistance, where needs are more acute, the UN will continue to provide assistance through the consolidated appeal for Iraq and the sub-region. This appeal, however, recognizes that improvements in Iraqi humanitarian conditions have been substantial. And in fact, that's why we have reduced our humanitarian assistance, because Iraq has been taking in its own hands many of those humanitarian emergencies. It also seeks to reduce the worst impact of poverty and conflict and promote conditions for the return of Iraqi displaced and refugees. The IRFI, the International Trust Fund, to which all of you have contributed, is coming to a close. It will be an historic date by the 31st of December. I remember when it was created, and there was a trust fund which was meant to keep alive Iraq. Well, He has seen $1.3 billion channeled through it from its inception, with the generous contribution of all of you, and particularly Japan and the EU, and we want to pay respect and recognition to that. This has been an invaluable tool to promote coordinated strategic assistance inside Iraq. I'm further pleased to know that in the recent Naples IRFI meeting on the 18th of February, both the government of Iraq and the donors welcomed the DSRSG humanitarian, my deputy on the humanitarian side, proposal for a post-IRFI mechanism, so that we don't lose all the mechanisms which have been useful, to make the compact a more effective driver of Iraq's internal development and international partnership. The UN agencies, funds and programs will also review now their own assistance framework in Iraq to promote a greater compliance with the Paris Declaration, align our work more closely with the new prioritization of the compact, and increase their presence in Baghdad to meet the challenges ahead. The International Compact for Iraq, which is jointly chaired by the Iraqi Deputy Prime Minister and our colleague and friend Ambassador Gambari, could be the primary vehicle for all these type of Iraqi initiatives. Following the very successful Stockholm conference, the Prime Minister Maliki has launched an initiative to review and put new priorities on the compact benchmarks, and that has the potential to make the compact an effective driver of other follow-up on this. In conclusion, Mr. President, we have ground for optimism, and it's good in this room to feel sometimes that. And I think we should all be proud of this, and particularly you, Mr. Ambassador, on behalf of the Iraqi people. The government of Iraq is signaling clearly that it recognizes that this is the year to demonstrate its ability to administer a state that enjoys broad support and intends to deliver basic services and security guarantees with the support of credible and independent institutions. Security has improved, and Iraq has asserted its sovereignty. This is the year when this is being clearly seen. With more sovereignty comes more responsibility, and responsibility to each one of its own communities. This is the time to build on what has been achieved after the recent first fully Iraqi-led provincial elections. Iraqi have made some substantially encouraging steps after prolonged suffering. It is up to the Iraqis themselves now to heal the wounds of the past and move ahead with a common vision. Trust among the people will increase by concrete, commonly shared steps, including a federal framework, distribution of wealth, viable revenue sharing system, the handling of Kirkuk in a soft way, and distribution and a solution or a formula for the disputed internal boundaries. The Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, yourselves, member of the Security Council, have consistently supported UNAMI to be proactive and results-oriented. We will continue to do so, but it is ultimately up to the Iraqi leaders to make the sound choices and the international community to encourage and support them to do so. Shukran. Thank you.